Back in Courtroom v. Their lead attorney, Graham Sterling, presented the case with complete confidence. The estate was financially unstable, my father had legitimately taken control, and I had no legal standing. He produced financial statements and corporate records. Then he asked the court to dismiss my claims permanently and transfer the property titles to my father. Judge Malcolm Harrison studied me carefully. He warned me that I was facing complex probate and corporate law without a civilian attorney, and that losing could mean massive financial penalties and losing my inheritance forever. Across the room, my father leaned back comfortably and exchanged a smug look with Marissa. I stood and walked to the lectern with my leather binder. The courtroom went silent. I told the judge I wasn't here because I didn't understand the law or couldn't afford a lawyer. I was a judge advocate general officer and a certified federal investigator with specialized training in financial investigations. I didn't come alone. I came prepared. The confidence vanished from my father's face. His lawyer froze. Marissa took off her sunglasses and stared at me as if she suddenly realized she never really knew me. I opened the binder and announced that certified federal evidence had already been filed with the court registry. For 6 months, I'd been conducting a forensic investigation into the trust, the property transfers, and the missing funds. First major exhibit, nearly $32 million siphoned out of the trust in 18 months, funneled through offshore entities to companies tied to my father. Everything was documented, backed by banking records no courtroom speech could erase. Then I presented the documents that changed everything. Several property deeds and restructuring agreements carried my signatures, but I had never signed them. Federal forensic specialists confirmed the signatures were forged. And most damning, these documents were created while I was deployed overseas. Military records proved I was thousands of miles away when these transactions supposedly happened. Judge Harrison began scrolling through the electronic filings himself. His entire demeanor changed. He was no longer the judge warning a naive soldier, but a judge staring at evidence of serious financial crime. He asked my father's attorney why he hadn't responded to the new federal evidence. Graham Sterling stammered, flipping through documents, whispering with his associates. My father, who that morning had laughed at my lack of an expensive lawyer, now gripped the edge of the table. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Marissa sat silent, staring at the evidence, unable to deny reality anymore. After reviewing the financial records, forensic reports, and deployment documentation, Judge Harrison delivered his ruling. My father's emergency motions were dismissed with prejudice. The estate titles were secured, the fraudulently transferred assets were frozen, and the matter was referred for criminal investigation. The foundation was ordered restored and the trust placed under legal protection. In the marble hallway after the hearing, my father caught up to me. The man who once commanded so much power now looked frightened and tired. He begged me to stop. I'm still your father. He promised we could fix the family. I turned and said, being my father once meant something to me. But when you tried to steal the inheritance my mother trusted me to protect, you ended that relationship yourself. I'm not fighting you for money. I'm fighting to make sure my mother's last wish isn't erased by greed. Then I walked away. Months later, the estate was secure again. The gardens restored. The historic property preserved. And my mother's charitable foundation was fully funded, her name helping families exactly as she intended. My father assumed my uniform was a weakness because he could never understand a life built on discipline. That courtroom taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes the person everyone assumes is powerless is the one who's been quietly preparing all along. My father walked into that courtroom believing he was facing a broken soldier. He walked out realizing he'd underestimated the one person he should never have betrayed. When my father laughed at me in that courtroom, he was sure he'd already won. He saw my army uniform, then the empty chair beside me, where an expensive lawyer should have been sitting, and he smiled. What he didn't know was that the leather binder in my hands held the proof that would destroy him. My name is Claire Maddox. I was 29 years old when I faced my father in Courtroom v. I was an active duty captain in the United States Army. Across the courtroom sat Victor Maddox, a powerful real estate developer trying to seize my late mother's fortune. Beside him was his new wife, Marissa, and 3 corporate lawyers, each with stacks of paperwork and the kind of arrogance that only money buys. My mother had left behind a 200-acre historic estate, several commercial properties, and a charitable foundation she'd built before her cancer. The entire inheritance was locked in an irrevocable family trust worth roughly $40 million. She wanted the property protected and the foundation to keep helping struggling families. My father saw something completely different. He saw luxury condos, replacing the trees, gardens, and old buildings my mother loved. When she passed during my senior year of high school, he changed overnight. The grief disappeared, replaced by business meetings, expensive dinners, and plans for a new life. Within months, Marissa became a permanent part of our home. She wore my mother's jewelry, replaced sentimental furniture, and always said the family was moving forward. Eventually, my father gave me an ultimatum: give up my military plans, take over his business, and surrender my claim to my mother's inheritance. I refused. I chose the army. The military gave me what my father never could: independence. I learned how to make decisions under pressure, read difficult situations, spot weaknesses, and stay calm when everyone else panicked. While I was deployed overseas, my father assumed the distance made me helpless. He began transferring trust money into companies tied to his failing development projects through complex corporate structures, believing I would never find out. After a 10-month deployment, I came home and drove straight to my mother's estate. I expected to see the gardens and oak trees I remembered. Instead, bright orange legal notices were nailed to the door. The property had been declared abandoned and was set for commercial liquidation. My father had used my absence to claim I'd abandoned my responsibilities and given up my claim to the estate. 2 days later, my father summoned me to an expensive private club. He sat in his suit, and Marissa wore my mother's bracelet. He slid a $5,000 certified check across the table. The military taught me to fight with nothing but skill and nerve. He offered it as a settlement in exchange for me giving up my claim to the estate. Marissa laughed. How could someone who spends her life in combat boots possibly manage millions of dollars in property? I picked up the check, looked at it for a moment, and pushed it back. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "I have nothing to sign," and walked out into the rain. My father took my silence for defeat. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly gathering evidence for 6 months.